excited to introduce to you Jocelyn, who is the intern on staff. How are you doing?
Pretty great.
You excited?
Yeah, I'm super hyped to be up here. A little nervy, but very excited.
So quick question is, so Jocelyn's the intern on staff, so she just graduated last year. And so my question is, what piece of advice do you have for current students? Because you've been through it, you've graduated, you completed, you're out of there.
I've done it. I would say, if you have a 4.0, ruin it now. Get over that. Honestly.
What if you have like really far from a 4.0? Yeah.
Keep going. You're doing great. No, honestly, like, school is important. Enjoy your classes. Like, sit there and like be like, man, like I'm so lucky that like I get to learn from people who've spent their whole life studying this. But don't sweat like your grades. Enjoy the people and experiences and like actually like learn from people.
That's solid advice. Awesome. All right, good luck.
All right, sweet. Yeah. I love you guys. All right, sweet. This is so fun to be up here. Kind of crazy, but I'm so excited because I get to talk about something that I'm so passionate about because it's something that has totally changed my life. But then I've gotten to see God use it to change the lives of so many other people. But before we get started, I just want you guys to take a second. I want to ask you a question. I want you to think about it on your own, and then you'll just talk to some other people. Why does Crew exist? Like, why at Miami do we have Crew? What is our mission? Just take a second, think about it on your own. All right, now you can turn to the person next to you, form little groups. I was an education major, in case you're curious. Glorify God? All right, sweet. Well, you guys hear at the beginning of every meeting, John and Annika usually tell us, they say that Crew at Miami is part of a global college student movement that seeks to equip and empower leaders to become more like Jesus and change the world, right? And you hear that every single time you walk in here. But if you're anything like me, by time 2 or 3, it goes right over your head. You tune it out. But it's so important for us to remember why we gather here, why Crew exists as an organization. And it's because we want to equip and empower leaders, right, which is you guys, because you go to Miami, you guys are leaders. And we want to equip and empower you to become more like Jesus and change the world. So, we want people to become like what Jane talked about last week, which is Christ-centered laborers. And not just for these first 4 years, but for a lifetime. Okay, that's what's important, is that you would be Christ-centered laborers for a lifetime. But almost none of you probably walked on campus as a Christ-centered laborer. I know I didn't. I joined Crew because I wanted community. I wanted friends, and I didn't really want to have to eat alone, right? No one wants that. I also wanted to grow in my faith. I wanted to be built into, and I wanted to grow spiritually and be developed. And none of those desires were inherently bad, but they were really self-centered, right? They were all about me and what I could get. And my guess is that most of you came in pretty similar places. Some of you might have waltzed on as totally Christ-centered laborers. That's great for you guys. But I wholeheartedly believe that Christ-centered laborers are built, not born. And so if you came to Miami as a Christ-centered laborer, it's because you had a youth pastor or a parent or a friend who poured into you and helped you get to that point, because they are built, not born. So building people is a huge part of what we do here in Crew. We want to like build people up in their faith, and that's why we have this little slogan that we talk about a lot in Crew, and it's win, build, send. And it's because we're focused on winning people to Christ, introducing them to who He is, and then building them up in their walk with Him so that they can be sent after their 4 years out to the rest of the world as Christ-centered laborers. And so today we're really going to focus and hone in on that build component. And there's a lot of things that go into that, right? We try and create a whole environment here where people can be built. So we have all sorts of different things, right? We have the weekly meeting, which you guys are at right here right now. That's awesome. We have Bible studies. You have trips like PCV or for spring break, Montenegro, spring break in summer, lots of different things. You have conferences, retreats. But you also have discipleship, which I would argue is the lifeblood of what we do. And that's what we're going to focus on today. And I care about this so much because this is the piece that's changed my life. I came to this meeting for 2 years, and my life kind of stayed the same. But when I got involved in discipleship, that's when my life was transformed. And then I've had the privilege over the last 3 years of sitting across the table from other people and watching God use it to transform their lives, and then watching them turn around and transform other people's lives through that. So it's really important, and I'm really excited that we get to talk about it. We're going to kind of go through the why we disciple, and then get really practical and be like, what does that actually entail? What does discipleship look like? And then help you guys get a picture of how you can be involved in that. So, basically, if you ask the question, why do we disciple? The simplest answer is that Jesus told us to, right? He said, go and make disciples of all the nations. So this is a command. And I know that for some of you, probably a lot of you in this room, you have this verse memorized. And you've heard it probably like a billion times. But I want you to really think about it. Because I want us to be able to walk this out and take this command seriously. And I promise that if you jump into discipleship, you will have the opportunity to watch these verses come alive, and it'll take you on the adventure of a lifetime. So, Jesus tells us to go and make disciples. That's why we do it. Another reason why we do it is he also tells us here what our scope is, right? He says, go and make disciples not just of Miami, but he says of all the nations. And now that's a pretty big deal. Because if you think about it, there's 195 nations. That's pretty massive. But this word nations even is talking about more than just actual geographical countries. It's talking really more about people groups, of which there are over 10,000, of which around 4,000 or more, some people even estimate 6,000, depending on how you count it, are unreached. So that's a really big deal, right? Kind of like makes me want to like curl up and be like, that's what we have to do? Like, I'm out. Like, no. But it's really cool because the way that we accomplish that scope and that mission is through discipleship. And so the second reason that we disciple is because it's only possible to accomplish this task if we make disciples to begin with. So we're going to take a little aside and look at this idea of spiritual multiplication. Some of you guys have probably heard of this. It's going to be a little refresher. Some of you, this might be totally new. But I think this is key to understanding how we actually can reach the nations. So anyways, we're going to look at a little thing about multiplication. So I love discipleship, right? If I could, I would disciple people every hour of my day awake. You can ask my team. I try to do it. It's not great. But the sheer reality of the 24-hour day and God creating me and all of you with limits means that I can't do that. I physically could not disciple everyone in this room, much less on this campus, right? There's also this really silly reality where I can't be in two places at once. So I can't disciple people here and in Europe and East Asia and the Middle East. But my heart is that everyone would be able to be discipled, everyone in this room, and that everyone on this campus and throughout the whole world would have the opportunity to be a disciple of Christ. So what do I do with that, right? Either I can be really bummed and just be like, well, I can't do anything, scope is too big, put my hands in the mirror and be like, we're done. But I think really what this motivates me to do is to multiply my life. So I try and find two girls who I'm like, okay, they believe in this great commission, they believe in going and making disciples of all the nations. And I'm gonna pour into them. I'm gonna spend my time teaching them what God's taught me, right? So I got those two little people, and they're gonna turn around, and they're going to disciple two more people. So all that it takes is three little rows of that, and I'm already reaching 17 people that I would not be able to reach, right? There's 17 people being discipled that I would not physically be able to do on my own. So This is why when we think about reaching all the nations, it's really important to think about multiplication. Discipleship is the way to do that. But it's also important when we're thinking about even our smaller scope here at Miami, right? Because God might not call me to go on stint in East Asia or in the Middle East, or to be part of taking the gospel to unreached peoples there. But he might call one of my disciples, like he might call one of those people down there. Oh, that's fine. He might call one of those people down there, who you can't see anymore, but that's cool. Right, he might call them to go there. But it's the same at Miami. We have 18,000 students roundabout here. And there's that many people on campus, but there's no way that one of us could individually reach them all. And I honestly think even within this whole room, if we spent the whole next semester trying to talk to every single person on campus about Jesus, I don't think we could do it. But if we each multiplied our lives, I think we could. Because I might not be an athlete or in a sorority or be a business major, but if I disciple women who are, and they have those connections, and they're able to take the gospel to those and make disciples in those clubs, in those majors, and on those teams, then ultimately, my life and your lives could be multiplied to every corner of campus. I don't know about you guys, but that gets me really excited. I walk around this campus and I want everyone to know Jesus, and I want everyone to be able to walk with him and have someone to do that alongside them. So that's another reason why we do it. And the final reason that I think we disciple, and it's pretty straightforward, and it's because it's what Jesus did. And I don't know about you guys, but if I'm looking what am I going to model my ministry off of? What am I going to model my life off of? I think Jesus is a pretty good person to follow. He chose 12 people, and he multiplied his life into them. He did life alongside them. He ate with them. He taught them. He healed people with them. He had conversations and discussions and arguments with the Pharisees with them. And then those 12, when he ascended into heaven, he sent them out along with all of the others to go and make disciples of all the nations, right? That's where that text comes from, is he's talking to his disciples. So that's why we disciple, because we're commanded to, because Jesus did it, and because it's the only way to reach Miami, and it's the only way to reach the nations. So I hope you're convinced that discipleship is important and worthwhile. And now we're going to look kind of at the really nitty-gritty, how do you actually do this? But first, I want you each to take a second to think about the person who's had the single greatest impact on your faith journey. And I want you to think about what that relationship looked like. What were your conversations like? What stands out to you? So just take a second and think about that before we move into this next bit. All right, hopefully you got a little bit of a picture, but I just want you to keep that in mind as we keep going. The way I see it, and the way that we see it generally, is discipleship can encompass a ton of different things, but you can really boil it down to three main components, right? Which is relationship, ministry, and time in the Word and prayer. And so I'm going to kind of break down what we mean by those and what that actually looks like practically. So relationship, pretty easy, honestly, I think. Pretty relational person, maybe that's hard for you guys, but so we're going to walk through it. You get to know the person. You ask them good questions. You care about them. You bring them into your life. You eat meals together. You invite them into your friend group. You meet their friends. You love them and reflect Christ to them. For me, honestly, when I first started discipling people, the only distinction that I made between women I discipled and women who were purely my friends was that women I discipled, I decided I had to love them so much that I didn't care if they liked me. I didn't care if I made them uncomfortable or they were kind of mad because I asked them a hard question. But honestly, after further thought, I've decided that that's how I want to treat my friends too. I want to love them enough. Someone curious laughing. I want to love them enough that I would go that far, that I'm not afraid to ask them hard things and push them towards the Lord. And that's what I want my friends to do to me. So that's just a thought on what that could look like. But I want you guys to also hear that basically the person you disciple is neither a project nor your responsibility. And I think that sometimes people feel both of those. They feel like the person they're discipling is their responsibility to make sure that they grow in their walk with Jesus. You want to be discipling someone who wants to grow, but you are not the one responsible for the growth. We have the honor and privilege of being a part of God's work in people's lives. But he is the one who makes people grow, and he is the one who does the hard work. We just enter into it. But they're also not your project. I see this sometimes where people treat their disciple like a project. But honestly, the person you're meeting with isn't going to care about all the wisdom you have to offer if they don't think that you genuinely care about and love them. So that's just a thought on relationship. But next thing is ministry. And I think this is what kind of spooks a lot of people. They're like, don't know how to do ministry, and they either just kind of leave it off, or they just feel really uncomfortable about it. That's a big barrier. So I want you guys not to overcomplicate this part. Ministry could mean anything from this last Monday and Tuesday, people were handing out dining hall surveys. You could go do that with your disciple. You could hand out dining hall surveys in front of Maple Street. Or, now that we have dining hall surveys right there done, you could we've asked people if they want an article about anxiety, about facing death without fear, about tragedy. You could take those articles with your disciple to someone's door and be like, hey, you asked for these, and give it to them. Or you could help your disciple get a Bible study going. Or you could even make it simpler. You could have them over for dinner while you're cooking for your housemates who don't know Jesus and show them Christ's love and try and have a spiritual conversation there. I want you guys to think you can use your life as ministry. Because basically all you're doing is you're modeling to your disciple how you do ministry, and sometimes it's in a really formal setting, like sitting across from someone and sharing the gospel, but sometimes it's in a really informal way of just letting them enter into your life and how you love your housemates or how you love your family. So that's some thoughts on ministry. And then finally, time in the Word and prayer is the last component. And that's so important, but really should be a part of what you're doing. It's really tied to your relationship and ministry with them. Because if you know someone, right? If you know someone who's a believer and they're really struggling with understanding that God is good and loving in the midst of maybe hardship that they're going through, or that God has a plan or is sovereign or trustworthy, whatever it may be, you get to come alongside them in that. You know that about them because you ask them questions, you have a relationship with them, and then you get to share with them what God's taught you in that. You might point them to scripture that's been encouraging to you, whatever. You pass on what God has taught you. It's similar with prayer, right? Prayer is going to flow naturally if you're doing ministry with them, right? You guys are going to go follow up a dining hall survey where someone's asked to know God personally. Before that appointment, you're going to pray in your car together and ask that God would open up doors for you to share the gospel with that person and that their hearts would be tender and responsive to that. So, ministry, I would just encourage you guys that that's the most fun part. That's where you get to see God show up in amazing, cool ways, and so do not leave that out, but also don't overcomplicate it. I was talking about time in the Word and prayer, guys. I'm so sorry. Anyways, time in the Word and prayer. You basically pass on what God's taught you, and maybe it's teaching them what God's still teaching you and allowing them into that. I think humility is a really huge thing when you're talking about time in the Word and prayer, right? You're going to let them know, hey, this is what I'm wrestling with, this is what God's teaching me, and this is what I'm being challenged with. So I think this can be a huge barrier to entering into discipleship if you feel like you don't have enough. If you don't know enough about God's Word, or you don't have anything to share, anything to give. But I want you guys to come back now and think about that person that I asked you about at the beginning, who's had the most impact on your faith walk. And the characteristics that you use to describe that relationship. The things that came to your mind or you remembered most about your time together probably was not the truths they passed on to you. Those were really important and key to making it a relationship that pushed you towards Jesus. But probably what you remember is the fact that they listened, that they cared, and that they believed in you. Because the moment that changed my life, I know, was sitting across the table from Jean Armstrong when I told her every awful thing that I'd ever done, and she looked me in the eyes and told me that she loved me more and didn't believe in God's ability to use me any less. That's what God used to change my life. And sure, that summer she shared a ton of truths with me from God's Word that gave me the foundation to go forward. And she showed me how to share my faith so that these last 3 years I could do that. But I needed to know that she loved me and cared for me before any of those other things could matter at all. So I say all this because I want to take the pressure off of you. You don't have to be a biblical scholar to disciple someone, and you don't have to be like super extroverted or confident in sharing your faith. You just have to be willing to walk with Jesus and sacrifice your time and be willing to enter into someone else's life. Paul tells his disciple Timothy in 2 Timothy 2 to pass on what he has taught him. So what Timothy's learned from the Apostle Paul, to pass that on and to entrust that to faithful men who can teach other people. And that's what you're doing. And that's part of why in Crew we're really big on transferable tools, right? I'm sure most of you have probably seen what a Knowing God Personally booklet looks like. We use a lot of those, Spiritual Life booklets. And it's so that you can pass those on, right? You might go through that one day with your discipler, and then you get to turn around the next day and share it with the person that you are discipling. And so that's part of why, as a staff team, we put together this discipleship curriculum that's accessible to you guys on the Facebook page. And part of that is just to lift that pressure off of you guys so that you don't feel like you have to prepare for 4 hours before an appointment, or you feel like you don't have enough knowledge to pass on to someone else. They're like around 14 lessons just packed with like biblical truth that has the power to transform someone's life. And so if you go through that with your disciple, that can structure that time in the Word really awesomely. And then the last thing I think that can really take the pressure off is that last part of the Great Commission that we often leave out. And it's where Jesus is telling us, "Behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." And so you don't have to do it alone. So if you're sitting there in an awkward conversation with the person you're supposed to disciple, and it's awful, 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 you and God get to be in that awkwardness together. You get to bond. It's great. Or if you and your disciple are sharing the gospel with someone and you totally mess it up, right? You like tell them something borderline heretical, right? You get to do that with God. You're not alone. And so you're not in these things alone. And it's honestly in walking out the Great Commission that we increase our intimacy with God. We get to understand to greater depths the fact that He is with us in the ups and downs, in the highs and lows, in the hard things. So, based on that, you might be wondering, okay, cool, this is great, now what do I do? And so I'm going to say, if you want to be discipled, if you presently are not being discipled, I would ask you to think of someone who you really look up to. Maybe it's someone 1 or 2 years older than you. Maybe it's someone who's leading your Bible study. And I would encourage you to ask them. Say, hey, like, I would love to learn. I would love to grow my relationship with you. I would love to learn how you do ministry and do that with you. I would love to hear what God's teaching you. I would love for you to disciple me. And just ask them. But if you don't know anyone like that, right, you're like, Joss, I don't know anyone who loves Jesus and is older than me and is ahead of me on this journey. Then mark that on your card tonight. When you're at the end of the meeting, mark that. Say, I would like to be discipled. And I just want to take a moment here and acknowledge that there are some of you who probably have been marking that for a long time and longing to be discipled. And I just want to let you know that at least especially for the women, we're taking steps towards partnering with local churches so that some of you, especially who are upperclassmen, can have someone in your life and be discipled. But that brings me to my next application point, which is that if you are an upperclassman and you are not discipling anyone, or you're only discipling one person, I would love to ask you to consider moving into someone else's life, because that could change their life, and there's a huge, 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 huge need. So, if you're still on the fence, I just want to assure you that when you begin discipling people, you have very little clue what you're doing. Honestly, when I first started discipling people, I had no clue. I figured I should take them through follow-up, I should ask good questions, I should care about them, and I should get to know them. But that's about it. And I think all of you are capable of that and so much more. And it's a blast. Moving into other people's lives and walking out the Great Commission with them, amazing. And I'm not gonna lie, I did the math. Only 2 of my closest best friends are not people who either have discipled me or I've discipled. So all of my close friends, except for 2 people who either have poured into my life or whose lives I've poured into. So it's pretty fun. You get to build deep relationship and friendship while following what God's commanded us to do. And it's such an adventure. And I don't want you guys to miss out on that. So finally, just before we wrap up, I want you guys to realize the impact that you could potentially have on someone's life. And so I'm just going to ask you guys that if you walk more closely with Jesus today because someone who already graduated poured into your life and invested in you, like, would you stand? Someone? All right. Now you guys look around, people who are still sitting. If you walk more closely with Jesus because someone who's standing, or someone who's older than you, who might not be in this room right now, if they poured into your life and invested in you and you walk more closely with Jesus because of that, would you stand? All right. Look around. Lots here standing. All right, you guys can sit back down. So, the point of that, guys, is I just want you to think about, like, what could happen if all of us in this room, like, committed to being a part of discipleship. If we committed ourselves to walking out the Great Commission. If we put whatever fears or barriers behind us and chose to invest in 2 or 3 people and multiplied our lives. Think about the ripple effect that could have on Miami's campus. Think about the ripple effect that could have across the world. How many people would leave this campus as Christ-centered laborers for a lifetime, right? Reaching their families, reaching countries, reaching workplaces. We are God's plan A. Like, he chooses to use us. It's kind of crazy, but he chooses to use us. And it's only if we're willing to sacrifice, to move past our fears and insecurities, and to take steps of faith to make disciples of all the nations. It's the adventure of a lifetime, and he goes with us. And I think you guys don't want to miss out on it. So if you're willing to jump in, please write that on the back of your card. And if you're already going at it, like, keep doing that. You're amazing. I love you guys a lot. And it's a joy to have a front row seat to all that God is doing in each and every one of your lives. It's been probably, like, the coolest thing about this year, is seeing God use you guys to impact other people's lives. And so I just want to encourage you to, like, continue doing that. But also, if you aren't pouring into someone else's life, like, consider that. You could change someone's life, who could change other people's lives, and ripple for forever. So, I'm just going to close us with prayer. Father God, I just thank you for each and every person in this room, Lord. I thank you for how deeply you love them. And Father, I just pray that you would move in their hearts right now. I pray that they would be excited about the fact that you want to use them. Father, I thank you that we get to be a part of what you're doing on this campus, that we get to be a part of what you're doing in the world. I thank you that you use us, Lord, and I pray that you would move in each and every one of our hearts, Lord, and that we would just, out of love, that we would want to go and make disciples of all the nations. I ask these things in your Son's name.